Hey, good morning. It's David Dillard again with Sleep and Sinus Centers of Georgia. I thought I'd talk a little bit about antihistamine therapy today. Antihistamines are a very common form of therapy for allergies, sinus problems, etc., and probably one of the most commonly taken medications on the planet. It's also one of the most widely studied topics on the planet. In one 10-year span alone, there are probably more than 30,000 articles published between 1994 and 2004 on antihistamines. And antihistamines take a wide variety of forms. Histamine is a very common trigger for a lot of things in the body. It's one of many molecules that are signaling molecules that tell other cells in the body what to do, typically released from, in the case of allergies, mast cells and some other cells, and they are triggers to the other cells surrounding them to produce a response to what is felt to be a threat to the body. It may not be a threat, like pollen is not a threat. Certain molds are not a threat, but the body treats it like a threat, and the response is overwhelming. Itching, watering eyes, itching, watering nose, sneezing to clear the nasal passages from that. Asthma can result, hives can result, rashes obviously can come along with that. And so we oftentimes wind up going to take antihistamines for that. Now, the body has a number of functions that can be affected by antihistamines, and some of the common things that we wind up using for other purposes started out as antihistamines, like Phenergan is a type of antihistamine. What we do find is that sometimes these antihistamines can have other effects that you're not really intending them to have. Benadryl is a trade name for diphenhydramine, which is an antihistamine molecule and is frequently found in sleeping aids. And that's because a lot of the original generation of antihistamines, which were developed for allergies and those kind of things, can have other effects because they are kind of chemical that tends to find itself going through fat very easily because of the charge on the molecule, and as such it will bind to receptors inside the brain and do other things. So when you are taking an antihistamine, you need to be aware that not just the first generation like Benadryl or Trimeton, using trade names that I learned, diphenhydramine, etc. Those kind of early on antihistamines can be very, very effective. But if you're taking them, you need to be aware that they can have some side effects that are not necessarily desirable. You don't want to be going to sleep while you're driving. That's, or anything else where you're climbing a ladder or doing anything else that requires concentration. Going for a job interview or something. So you want to test it out when you know you're going to be able to sleep if you need to. Another practical tip is using antihistamines can also be a problem if you are prone to bladder issues. Especially gentlemen with prostate problems, other bladder issues can be affected, ocular problems. If you have eye issues, you need to discuss antihistamine use with your ophthalmologist or optometrist before you do that. So some practical tips and safety margins first. Some people can actually be allergic to different antihistamines or have adverse reactions. So if you take it and you don't seem to be getting better, it can be an issue. You can have paradoxical reactions to that, so it can hype up small children. And as always, you want to read the labels carefully. Let's talk about some broad sweeping strokes about antihistamines themselves, there are a couple of different classes of antihistamines and multiple different histamine receptors. Now, the two most common that we talk about are H1 and H2 receptors. So H1 receptors are the ones we talk about for allergies. H2 receptors can be associated with acid production. So the Xantax and other types of molecules that are directed to getting rid of acids can also be histamines, and so consequently you can have some interreactions between those. And they can get some relief because these molecules are not perfect. They don't separate the two different types of receptors on the top of the cell, which are kind of like signaling devices on the outside of a cell. So you've got a cell, and the cell puts up a flag, if you will, and if there's a problem, a molecule will come over and knock over the flag and tell the inside of the cell to do something. In this case, these molecules come in and bind to these receptors and more or less stay longer than the average histamine would bind, and consequently trigger a reaction and then shut down that response. So you want to be careful when you take any antihistamine about how it's going to affect you. The second thing that you want to do is that you want to make certain that you check with your ophthalmologist, or if you have problems with your prostate or problems with bladder issues, you want to check with your doctors before you use any of those kind of medications. And then finally, one last small tip is that if you find an antihistamine to be non-helpful any longer, you've taken it so long it becomes non-helpful, then you may consider rotating the antihistamine to something that may have worked in the past. It seems that the antihistamines tend to wear out, or we develop tolerance to them over time, but simply changing the antihistamine around can be helpful, even if it's one you've used in the past that hasn't, that had stopped working and now may begin to work again. So that's a concept known as antihistamine rotation, and it's surprisingly hard to find actually on Google, but the concept as it was taught to me was that essentially the body alters its response to that molecule binding. So swapping antihistamine around is going to be helpful. Remember that there are topical antihistamines that you can use in the nose and in the eyes. Astelin is one molecule that comes to mind. Patinase and Pataday ocular products are just two examples. There are multiple different types of antihistamines you can use, but hopefully this is something that you can take and apply to your lives and help out, and hopefully it's helpful, and we'll see you soon.